1, we should be recording right now. Hello everyone, I am back with the final video on the Britcon English Nationals, and I'm here with Russell, who has done a lot of work on the meta aspect of it, on the numbers, the number crunching, and by the way, also won the English Nationals. You're the current ruling national champion.
Hello, Bo. How are you?
I am very good, and congratulations again on your victory at the tournament.
Thank you very much.
So we're here today to talk about the results and how the tournament went, and what that tells us about the meta in the UK. And basically that will reflect on the rest of the world watching as well. I guess that we have a lot of other viewers going in and watching what's happening, because you guys are the biggest meta. So how many people actually attended Britcon?
It was booked for 38 and they had 34, I believe.
So they had a few dropouts.
Yeah, they had 2 actually on the day. But that helped them in a way, I think, because it got the numbers equalised. They had 1 not turn up, and then 1 person then dropped at that point. So that got you your 34 people. I think all the experienced players turned up. It was a couple of less experienced players that disappeared, from what I could see.
Which means that we should have some results that actually tell us a fairly good spread story about what the competitive scene is in the UK right now. I was following obsessively during the weekend.
I heard about that.
So I was really interested, and I was bummed out that nobody was recording anything, because that would have been...
sorry I didn't give you any updates. I was somewhat occupied.
No, you were busy playing.
I was quite busy.
Yeah. No, it's a TO thing. I mean, I just want at some point somebody to start recording whole tournaments, start recording the games, and I am trying to work on that myself, but apparently I'm no tech whiz, so I'm not.
That makes 2 of us.
Yeah, I'm failing every time right now. I've actually tried recording quite a few games now, and I have a problem with microphones. But, well, anyways, I want to show everyone the results, and we can talk about them as well for a bit. So I'm just going to share my screen and take you to the results page here. So, Russell, can you see what I'm seeing right now as well?
Yeah, I can see that.
Good, right. So here we have the actual end results of the Britcon English Nationals. We have Russell, you got the first place. Luke was second place with 3 wins, 2 draws. Then we had Pete Barrett of the Juggernauts, who had 4 wins and 1 loss. And then Michael Smith with 3 wins, 2 draws. And Richard with 3 wins, 2 draws. And the first thing you automatically notice is that there's a very specific spread of nation factions in the top ranking here, of course.
Oh yeah, there is, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. That's fairly obvious. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but just going down the list, we see a few surprises. Some of the top players did mediocre. I guess that's they ended up in some of the top games, and some of the rounds got knocked down the list, and then that's what happens. For me, Martin Fairweather was a surprise all through the days, the first day, because he had a very specific list, which I had not rated very highly, but he did well, and then he got really knocked down on the second day. And then right at the bottom, we see that we have people like not having a single win, which is what you would expect. And again, we have a very specific faction choice ending up at the bottom.
All 4. There were 4 armies that ended up with no wins.
Yeah,
and they were all the same nation.
Yeah, which really sucks. I'm very bummed out about this. I really want to make Germany work, but right now it just the meta just speaks its own clear language. Though I will notice that Owen Balding took an Italian list and actually had a win and 2 draws, which is kind of good. So there were interesting like bumps. We also see a few French lists doing okay, Finnish lists doing okay, and we of course have a French list on number 8 as well. So there was a spread. There was a there wasn't there was a surprising lack of American armies in my book. I thought there would be a lot more American armies. I also thought that there would be more Japanese armies, but no.
Yeah, there were only 3 American armies, and I think it was 2 Japanese armies.
Yeah,
a couple of the American armies did rather well.
Yeah, they did okay. I mean, we have a 7th and a 10th, so that's pretty good.
And then they were 2 strong players. I know both of those players actually. You got Gary Morgan, from Wales, very good player, very solid, and then Michael Carrick, who I've come across a couple of times, another very good player. Who's both of those guys go out and they win lots of games regularly.
Yeah.
So maybe not surprised. And then Martin, who's running the other US list, he tends to run fun US lists.
Yeah.
Like he will run Philippine, USA, and so he brings really fun lists. He's a great guy to play. He's not there looking to win 5 games. He's there looking to have a really good time, which he always does. So.
Yeah, that is a guaranteed when you go to these sort of events. You most of the time you will have an absolutely amazing time, especially if you're not looking just to win the games. You will find that, well, you end up in the middle somewhere, but you have such an amazing time often. Right. So that was the results. Let's talk about what this tells us about the meta so far. So my first conclusion is, well, if you want to win tournaments, you have to go British or you have to go Soviets.
Well, the evidence is there. So if you look at the top 10, the army lists going 1 to 10 are British, Soviet, British, Soviet, British, Soviet, USA, French, USA, and then British, and then you've got a couple more British lists, a couple more Soviet lists. They are completely dominating the top half of the draw. The other thing as well, I just want to point out, of the top 10, so I think I said to you about 50% of the players took double platoon, 50% took single platoon. 9 of the 10 top lists with double platoon.
So only 1 was a single platoon.
Only 1 was single. So well done. That was Michael Carrick with the Americans. So well done to him.
Yeah, that's pretty well done, because we had the same exact result at the Danish Nationals 38-man tournament again. Double platoon simply win more games. That just happens. Yeah,
absolutely.
So that is also a pretty clear-cut meta thing that we can say that going double platoon and bringing Soviets or British is the way to go. And you can, of course, get good results with other nations. What do we think? Is this a case of the best players just bringing certain nations, or is it that the certain nations boost the players up the ranks?
I think it's a bit of both. I think it's self-fulfilling. It's like a vicious circle almost. The better players know which lists will work better for them. And therefore they're bringing those lists. So you do see an element of that. So that's why I always say, when I look at the lists that perform best, I don't describe them as the best lists. I describe them as a list being picked by the people who are doing best. Which is a slight, I know it's very pedantic, but it might be an important difference.
There is a difference there in my opinion.
There is. We've seen that as well, haven't we? We managed to work that out from WTC when we were trying to work out the difference between players and the difference between the lists. So,
and we'll talk a bit more about that ranking idea that we two have been working on for a while here. But let's finish up the meta thing here first. Let's also talk about the bottom, because I had expected some nations to do badly, and they mostly did.
They did.
And I also think that we can do a little bit of talking about the lists. Certain lists I had also expected to do badly, and mostly they did. So for me, most of the lists that ended up in the bottom half, for instance, I had predicted most of them would end up there, and most of the lists that ended up in the top half, I predicted would end up there. So there's a split for me that's really clear. And of course, Germany is in the bottom here, very clear.
They're there. So if we look at the top 10, and we're compared to maybe, so in the top 10, there are 4 British lists and 3 Soviet lists.
Yeah.
In the bottom 10, there are 4 German lists, both the Japanese lists.
Yeah.
Only 1 British list, and then you've got the Finnish, the US, and Australian list.
Yeah.
So the Germans are really struggling.
They are struggling.
Highest ranked German list was the good one that we liked.
Yeah.
Was the Triple Engineers, and that came 14th with 2 wins, draw, and 2 losses. So very respectable.
Very respectable result. Yeah.
The other thing is, of the bottom 10, 50% of the lists were single platoon.
Yeah.
And then the dice average. So the dice average was 14 for the lowest lists.
Yeah.
And it was 16 for the top 10 lists.
So again, we're seeing that if you want to win games, you're going to have to push the dice up into the 15, 16 range.
I'd say 14. There were 1, 2, 3, 4. There were 5 top 10 lists with 14 dice.
Yeah.
And nothing lower. So I think that kind of, if you aim for 14 as a minimum, that's a good place to start from.
Yeah. That is a good place to start. What about the bottom lists? What were their dice, order dice counts?
The order dice counts are interesting because although the average is 14, so it's not so different. No. You've got a couple of high count dice lists with 19, with 18, with 17, and then we've got 2 with 10, 1 with 13, and a couple with 14. So you've got the very low dice count lists in there, and a couple of very high dice count lists. I think, as we discussed, is high dice count list, is that always an advantage? And the risk is, in certain missions, you're giving easy points to an opponent with soft units. And that may be what's happening for some of those lists.
Yeah, it may be. Sorry, you chopped out in your video chopped out a bit. So, right. So that would be the kill points missions. I really wish we could see for the individual missions how they had performed these lists.
To some degree, I can. I've got all the rounds noted down, so I can go and see individual performances by round. So, and I've got the missions written down, and I've got the results and the opponents. So we can look at that a little bit if you want.
Yeah, but not. Then we would need to have already specific things picked out. Otherwise, I just think it'll take too long.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, it's a rabbit hole.
Let's instead talk about the meta of the units that are chosen. Then.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I've got that here. So on the final table, of the top 10 lists, there were 13 Stuarts in those top 10 lists. And obviously some of those lists couldn't take Stuarts, so it's pretty high count. So if I do it by first place and work down, my list had 2 Stuarts and Gurkhas. Luke Salter, he had a Stuart. He was Soviet. He had a Stuart, Katusha, couple of snipers, couple of engineers. Pete Barrett, third, he had 2 Stuarts.
Yeah, and PPA jeeps.
Yeah, there are 2 PPA jeeps. Yeah. I'm getting mixed feedback on those actually, on what people thought of them.
Yeah, me as well. But I mean, some people like them. They are pretty cheap. I can understand that, but
I think they're 68 points, so they cost, because they're vet, so they cost the same as having a flamethrower team in a jeep.
Yeah,
they
do. And for me, I think there are other things I would rather take in the armored car slot. But Pete obviously did well with them. So
he lost his first game though. So a bit of the old
Gerben, I think.
It was Gerwin who beat him. So he lost that, and then unfortunately I didn't get to play him. So never quite.
And then we have Michael S. who had a horde and some
with
armor.
4 pieces of armor. So 4 units of light armor, and then lots of Strafbutt. And that worked well for him. He had no losses. He had 3 wins and 2 draws. I've played him. Really nice guy. Played him in Aldershot. I was impressed by that performance, I'll be honest.
Nice.
That was maybe a bit better than I expected, though I hear he's a good player.
And me as well. I had not that I had ranked him as a player because I don't know him, but I had looked at his list and thought, well, he'll do a bit better than middle of the pack. But I didn't. I had not ranked him as number 4.
Fair. I agree with that. But he did very well. So good for him.
He did.
But then number 5 is a guy called Richard. I'm not even going to try the second. It's a bit of a running joke. I can't pronounce his second name.
Yeah, he has some sort of
Running joke. I can't pronounce his second name.
Yeah, he has some sort of Eastern European last name.
Yeah, and he had a double Stuart Gurkha list.
Yeah,
a variation of mine, pretty similar.
Yeah,
3 wins, 2 draws. He is a very strong player as well. He is a good player. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
Next after that was a newcomer. It's his first ever tournament.
Chris Davis.
Welsh guy. I know he's very highly regarded by his clubmates. So
I think he had brought a strong list, and his results, they were really good.
It was a strong list. He had a Stuart and a Katusha in there, and he had the engineers.
Yeah.
And good list. I played him in my final game, so I can go over that if you want.
Yeah.
Then Gary Morgan, who I mentioned, is another very strong player, again from Wales. He had 3 wins, drawn and lost. He had a US list with double Stuarts.
And a lot of flamethrowers.
Yeah, which is a great way of running Americans.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, so that then we had Topher.
Yeah.
Topher was bringing the high dice count French list.
He was the Horde, Gunline, and Cavalry list. Yeah,
that's one. Yeah, he had 3 wins and 2 draws.
Yeah.
So I think he lost his first game. So
he did to Michael S, I think.
Yes, that's right. It was Michael Smith who beat him. That's right. Absolutely right. And then he lost his last game to Luke Salter when they were basically playing for second place.
Yeah. Oh, man, that is a matchup as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I caught a little bit at the end of the game. Again, we can talk about specifics later if you want.
Yeah.
And then Paul Wickens, who you know very well.
Yeah.
He came in with 3 wins and 2 losses, same as Topher. And he had the
also Gurkhas and Stuarts. Yeah, so that's a pretty strong top list. Yeah, you can definitely see the trend. And if we look at the bottom lists, we see some suboptimal choices for the German lists. So Patrick had brought Hanomaks, which maybe not. They're
lovely units, but they're not worth points.
They're overpriced. And Philip Baxter had brought LMG and MMGs, and they are overpriced as well. Alex had brought a Panzer IV and some LMGs. Again, pricey units, lovely models for some of that, but pricey. Daniel Moody had brought a barbecue Australian list, which I was surprised that he ended up at the bottom.
Again, I think Dan has got a reputation for being very reckless in the way he uses his units.
Yeah.
It may be he's very aggressive. He's great fun to play against.
Yeah.
And he's there to play and have fun. He's not there to.
No.
So that reflects. Just one thing on the lowest performing lists. What really sticks out is how few dice kills they got. So the average number of dice kills they're getting is about 15 over 5 games.
Yeah.
Whereas the top lists are killing 50 or 40 over 5 games. So there's a huge difference.
That is a huge difference.
And that's not the net number.
40.
That's not the net number. That's the number of kills. So what that's telling you is if you want to win these tournaments or do well,
you need to be able to take out
kill. Yeah. You need to be able to kill units. Just pinning them or whatever else you're doing won't work.
That is not enough. And that's quite funny because there's that old saying that pins wins, and that just is not true here. You have to be able to finish the shooting round. You have to be able to take out those units. And
then that comes through there.
Yeah.
Although there is an element as well as I think I know in a couple of my games getting a lead on turn 5, getting a dice lead, then it ended up turning into a rout. Because your opponent's dice down and you can end up tabling an opponent because they just run out of options.
Yeah, that is absolutely true.
The good news is nobody lost all 5 games. So everyone in the lower section got at least a winner or a draw, which I think important.
That is amazing for morale. It really is. Yeah. Right. So the Stuart was pretty much an auto-include. Are there other units that we see being auto-include for this as well? We are specifically looking now at the medium mortar and at the Gurkhas and at flamethrowers and multi-rocket launchers. So what does the story tell us here?
Kind of MLRS less so.
Yeah.
That had a mixed performance. There was only a few units with them, and they were mixed. They seemed to work best when it was an experienced player who took one. Taking two doesn't really seem to do very, very much for you. I think one of your friends, I think Matthew from Juggernauts, run that, and it just didn't work. The medium mortars that are inexperienced are appearing up there. A slight advantage for snipers as well. Lists with snipers did a little bit better than those without.
Which is kind of interesting, because snipers have seen ups and downs in how popular they were, but there might be awakening a revival here.
I think the reason for their comeback is people are bringing in experienced mortars. So a great way of countering that is a sniper. So we've got that happening there, and then armor units with armor really that seems important. If you want to try and get at least 2 units of armor in. And I think what's happened there for double platoon tournaments, you may be able to create a situation where you have more armor than your opponent can cope with, because they don't have enough anti-tank. So that seems to make a difference as well.
It does, and that is maybe why the Soviets have become popular as well, because they have lots of options for anti-tank, right? They have Fausts, they have dogs. There's a lot of options if you're running Soviets.
Absolutely, yeah.
And at the same time, you have a lot of options for bringing your own armor, so that combination is really, really strong in most generic reinforced Soviet lists, right? So how many mortars did we have?
Oh, where's my total? Let me go find it. Right, okay. If I remember, it's not like 48. I'm just looking for. I've got the spreadsheet page somewhere. Let me go find this now. No, this isn't making very good YouTube video of me.
Just you searching stuff.
Worksheet example, army points per unit. Team style. Yeah, it looks like it's about 48 units. Yeah. So it was a lot. It's fair to say.
That is quite a lot.
Yeah, across 38 players. Did I say 38? 34. Sorry, 34 players. So it's a lot. Yeah. So it's something people were definitely bringing. Yeah. And it seemed to perform pretty well overall. Most of the armies at the top had them. Yeah. So that is definitely a trend. Yeah. Say.
Bring your medium mortar. That is one thing we can say for definite. Bring your medium mortar. That is
quite a few players bringing 2. So why not bring 2? You know, we saw that quite a bit.
Yeah. And what about transport?
Lots of transports, actually, more than I expected. Okay. So people are moving things around. Nearly all one armoured. The only armoured transport, other than a couple of Hanamags, you occasionally might see a couple of Komsomolets. Yeah. Finns, interestingly, taking them, not Russians, because the Russians, like the British, if they are taking, they're taking Bren gun carriers.
Yes, they are. Yeah. So the Finns are taking the Komsomolets, which I find quite funny, because they're open topped and they are unreliable, so they get double pinned all the time. But they're still bringing them, which is kind of weird.
It's a surprise, isn't it? It really is a surprise. But the players want them for mobility, I guess. Especially when if I was bringing Finns, I'd want to be using Sissy, because what I want to advance and go and ambush and just keep shooting. Yeah. But there's there's always different ways to play different lists. So
there is.
And certainly there was a use of Komsomolets by those guys. So there were 58 transports in total taken. Interestingly, 58.
58. That's almost 2 per person.
Yeah, they're not far off. And lots of jeeps. You've seen lots of jeeps with flamethrower combos. Yeah. Cool. There were only 14 flamethrower teams.
That is surprisingly few.
Yeah, but there were 41 units that had flamethrowers. So including lots engineers, but only 14 flamethrower teams. So it's quite interesting that. Not very high at all.
No, it's not. Maybe that is a reaction to the use of snipers, or maybe that people have just figured out that it's not that much of a threat. Do I really need it? Do I need the points for something else? Yeah.
Yeah, I often take one, but I am very aware it's a toss up. There's a 1 in 6 chance that when you use it, you're going to lose it. Which is one issue, and the other issue is it will very rarely be hitting on more than a 50% chance. So
and you're pretty much guaranteed that it will die the turn after it's unloaded.
Especially if it doesn't hit. That's right.
Yeah, especially if it doesn't hit. Yeah.
So that's the issue with them. Maybe more and more players are seeing that. I know flamethrower engineer teams seem quite popular because they're a little bit more durable, and you don't have that issue of losing a dice if you roll a 1. So people picking those as well. Sorry, snipers. There are 18 snipers.
18.
Two of the lists had double snipers, so that means we had 16 lists with snipers.
Who had a sniper?
Just under half of all armies had snipers.
Yep.
But I would take one. Given the number of mortars, I'd say don't leave home without one. Take one.
Yeah. Okay.
And then other thing, over 34 lists, there were 45 tanks. That's a lot of tanks.
That is a lot of tanks.
In that. So that does include wheeled armored vehicles, but that's a lot.
With armor,
So, and there was quite a lot of players trying to play 2 or 3 armored units. Yeah. Because I just think if you can do that, it creates mismatches that your opponent will struggle.
It does, and it enables you to really focus your force on one point of the battlefield where you can actually push. Because they're so fast, they bring a lot of heat to the enemy, so you can create those push throughs where you actually get to push through the enemy's lines and actually get to go into his back area. They are just such a useful tool.
I would second that. I agree completely, and when we saw that with the way they were being used, definitely. And then 3 flamethrower vehicles, 3 vehicles that had flamethrowers attached. I think there was maybe 1 or 2 wasps in there, maybe a BA. Is it BA-20?
Maybe. So, and then does that include the PPAs?
Oh, of course. Sorry, you're right. It's 2 PPA flamethrower jeeps and the wasp. So that's fewer than I would have expected. Actually, only 3. So people aren't taking them. I understand it means a vehicle doesn't have, you don't have a lot of range. Your vehicle, but it's maybe a bit of a surprise it's so few.
Yeah, especially because vehicle flamethrowers can be really useful and really scary. I don't know if you tried this, but I played. We have one player here near my club where he often brings a T-34 with a flamethrower hull mounted, and then the medium gun on top. Damn, that thing is frightening, and he just rams it right down your face.
You just have to stay away from it. It's horrible.
You really have to back away all that you can. So and that's pretty scary. So I can completely get the appeal of having that flamethrower tank, but they're also expensive, aren't they? And again, you might run out.
True. That's true. They're not cheap. The other thing you probably want to do as well is you need, although we're talking about you need lots of armor. It's popular. You want really 4. It looks like you want 4 infantry sections as well. 3 is not enough to get a good result. You need 4.
And you base that on what do the top lists have here?
It almost invariably it's 4 or 5.
Yeah.
So I can see that across the board. Tends to be 5 actually.
Yeah.
I'd say over half of them are 5. 1 or 2 more, but generally 5 seems to be where people are going with those. And what I like is most of the good players are not taking the same 5 types of.
So they have different roles for each of their infantry units.
Exactly, they're doing different things. So I took 3 Gurkha units and 1 infantry unit, regular infantry. But you look at some of the other top players, and they're doing similar things. Mike Smith finished really well. He had 6 infantry sections, including tank rider veterans, and then lots of Strafbat, so doing different jobs. Luke Salter had 5. He had a real mix. So he's got 2 assault engineers.
Yeah.
A Strafbat. He's got his 3 rifle squad, and he's got another rifle squad. So, and he's got a job.
2 units of skirmishers, 2 units of pushers, and 2 units of backline holders. Is that it?
Absolutely, that's what he's doing. And it worked well. For him.
That's a good mix.
Yeah, Gary Morgan, who's one of the top players, he had, excluding the War Dog, he had 6 infantry sections.
Yeah.
And he's got Marines in there with BARs, so move and fire, a couple of engineer units with flamethrowers. So again, they're doing different jobs.
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing. People are not just using, I'll take 5 regular infantry, or they're all doing different jobs.
Nice. I like that. I really like, because that will mean that you're not spamming one unit. You're seeing different things, and your units actually have roles, and that means you have to show a bit more skill when you're using them.
And your opponent, I think, needs to show skill as well, because I know myself, when you play an opponent who's got infantry sections all doing different jobs, you have to pay close attention to them and what the different ones are. You can't treat them all the same.
No.
So you're constantly checking, is that the one with the flamethrower? Is that the one with... But again, that's where what you see is what you get is very, very important. I think it's very important that it's easy for your opponent to recognise what you've got. Otherwise, it's unfair. So
yeah. Well, it gets confusing, especially after 3
very
games.
easily. Especially if you've got a mix of vets and regulars, but they're actually the same type of troop. In that situation, I think it's kind of respectful to mark the vets or mark the regulars with the counter, so your opponent can see which ones they are.
Really see.
There's no confusion.
Well, speaking of vets and regulars, what was the spread of regular and inexperienced and veteran units for this event?
Again, given it's Britain, we saw more vets than you would typically expect to see. I think that's like 45% of all units were vets. And then regulars are being squeezed. Actually, more and more people, if they're bringing units, they're either bringing vets or inexperienced. So regulars are actually kind of in decline, and you see regulars, interestingly enough, they are appearing in the lists that are not doing so well. So make of that what you will. I actually did some maths a couple of years back where I worked out the survivability rate of vets, regulars, and inexperienced if they're fired at. And I looked at the cost of the unit and the number of men you can take, and it actually turned out if you're going to be fired at by enemy infantry with light arms, you're probably better having lots of inexperienced infantry and taking some casualty. They're having a fewer number of vets, which surprised me. And regulars were the least efficient point-wise. So maybe that's coming through a bit. Regulars, I know people like them because they're hitting on threes before they move, and even when they move with Americans. But it's interesting that they're not performing that well necessarily. They tend to be in the armies that are not doing quite as well. So I'll run the numbers on that. I'll see what the correlation is. But yeah, people doing well often have vets plus 1 or 2 inexperienced. Backline holders, I think, is what you call them.
And so. I think that mix that we just talked about before is also reflected in this, because you won't need that high of the experience level for your backline holders most of the time. Most of the time, a few inexperienced dudes, that's fine. But for your push units, you often want them to be veteran. You often want them to have special rules. You want them to have something that can benefit them when they push up and make them more survivable. Or you want them to be in a large unit of inexperienced infantry that can push up, bamboo hold, whatever, right? So I think that those different roles, and I think the role that regulars are mostly suited for is the skirmish infantry. The rifle armed infantry that sort of stays on your own half of the board but delivers pins and casualties, and maybe that skirmish infantry is not that popular at tournaments. It's maybe not that efficient. They're not necessarily doing the job you need them to do.
I spent 70 points on 7 regular infantry for my 4th infantry section. And actually, I would probably have been better off with 10 inexperienced men. In fact, I'm pretty certain I would have.
Yeah, you would have.
So the point cost, probably I should have done that. So that's something I'll take on board for my next.
But it's really difficult to argue with results, Russell. I mean, results speak for themselves. You did all right.
It went well. But you're always looking to improve, aren't you? And if you just sit there and say, "Oh yeah, you won't improve." So. I'll try and make this even.
What about dog teams? We quite often see dog teams in the Soviet lists.
I think Luke, who was the highest ranked Russian player, he had 2 dog mines. We had another couple. Another player there, it's dog mines. There's quite a few of them around, and they seem to perform quite well. Probably it's hard to say whether they're performing well or not because they're in strong lists to begin with. So we can't say it's the dog mines that make the Soviet lists work. What we can say is they're an important part of it. So
okay, so not a definite answer for that, but yeah,
it's hard to do. Yeah, there were 41 different types of anti-tank unit, and Russian players where they could. Let's have a quick look. What were they taking? So I've got it here, starting with Chris Davies. So I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 dog units across 8 lists. So more often than not, players are taking dog mines.
Yeah. What about
Panzerfausts?
Yeah, they are pesky. Yeah, they are annoying, and they're way more annoying than the Japanese suiciders. Because the Japanese suicider, when he charges you, that's a charge. Just stay out of 6 inches range. You can shoot him down.
Yeah.
But those dog mines, that's 24 inches, and they hit on a 4+. Damn, that's annoying.
They come from everywhere. Yeah, they say something to do. The Germans took a reasonable number of Panzerfausts. It seems normal to actually to only have 1 or 2 Panzerfausts in a unit,
which is my recommendation as well. Yeah.
No one was going heavy and taking, say, 4 for a tank hunting team, which I know Paul Wickens has done before, and that can work quite well. Yeah, because you can take 5 regular infantry, give them 4 Panzerfaust, stick them in a field car, and they can be very good at taking out tanks, and then they should still be there the next turn as well. So
they should.
And he fires all 4
you make
well.
damn
He doesn't
sure
mess around.
That one tank is damn sure dead.
That is exactly what he does. He doesn't mess around. He fires all 4 of his Panzerfaust
in one go.
He wants it dead. He's going to make sure. Yeah.
Well, 20 points for a dead tank, that is pretty cheap. I mean, most tanks are 140 points plus, right? So, yeah.
I think given how dominant Stuarts are, I think we all need to start working out how are we going to kill Stuarts? Maybe that's one way. Panzerfaust in vehicle and the infantry's there afterwards to do stuff.
Yeah. That would make sense. Or dog mines also work, but yeah. Right. We also mentioned Gurkhas, the infamous Gurkhas. You were using Gurkhas, and they are everywhere in the British lists. What I could see, there was a lot of British lists bringing Gurkhas, right?
Yeah, 3, 4, 4 of the 8 British lists had Gurkhas, and they were the ones that were finishing at the top. So again,
if you want to win tournaments, you also need to figure out how to kill Gurkhas.
Definitely, and the way I run Gurkhas because they're basically, you can't charge them unless you've got Polish cavalry.
Yeah. And then it's a toss-up whether or not that works out.
Yeah. So my recommendation would be, if you're fighting Gurkhas, first of all, how many does your opponent have? Yeah. So, and what I mean by that is he running like 5, 6, 7, 8-man teams of Gurkhas? Now, if he's running 5, they are manageable, because what you need to do there, you need to open up on them, try and kill 1, get him down to 4 men, and all of a sudden, if you do get into combat,
they're not scary anymore.
They're not so scary. They're going to get 4 attacks. You're going to get maybe 4 as well if you're got an 8-man unit or even a 7-man unit, because you round up.
You might lose, but the British player is not going to choose that combat if you can avoid it.
Yeah, that's not what he wants to do. So with Gurkha units, as soon as you can, start firing on them.
Yeah.
Ignore
and whittle them down.
Whittle them down, and when you get them down to a smaller number, at that point you can then ignore them if you want, because he can't do with them what he wants to do.
Exactly.
So they're less of a factor. So I would say do that. That's what I don't like. So if I'm playing Gurkhas, I want you to either really focus on killing the unit, in which case it can go down and it can absorb a lot of your attention. Yeah. But if you kill a couple of them and then ignore it, I've now got a Gurkha unit that's not really going to be able to do the job I want it to.
Yeah, exactly.
So I do the same with Bamboo Spearmen. Yeah. If there's a 15-man unit Spearmen, get them down to 9, 10 men. Now they're not really scary. Yeah. So that's why I'd recommend people deal with Gurkhas.
Yeah. But that's the like the tactics against any sort of close combat unit. You need to whittle them down a bit, and then they become ineffective.
Exactly.
Yeah. And Gurkhas and Bamboos and Polish Lancers, all of those, they need to win those close combats, because that's what they can do, basically. Exactly. So if you take that away, that's the end of the game. You don't need to kill the whole unit as such.
I completely agree.
Yeah. Right. So that was the unit meta. Is there any surprises that you've sort of stumbled across that you didn't think turn out like this? Because all of this seems very predictable.
I wish I could say yes, but unfortunately no. Looking at what happened, I think we called it pretty bang on, actually. And it's kind of a shame almost. I'd like to have seen someone doing something different, but we're just not seeing it at the moment. So that is maybe so the slight concern there is which of the strongest lists has become a bit predictable, and players are understanding that and using but that's a good reason for having lots of different tournaments with different rules. So for example, I know the Megatron recently has a completely different way of drawing lists up, which is great. And I think we need to encourage.
Believe me, that will make a difference if people start using theater lists instead, and that's a huge difference. I had a game yesterday. Actually, I had 2 games yesterday evening, and with my teammates, and we were doing the Megatron thing, so theater lists, and I had brought sort of a Gurkha list again, and I got whooped. I simply got absolutely plastered by both of my opponents. I had no chance. So as soon as you go theater, things start shifting up. You have to start changing your thought process. What's going to happen? Everything starts changing. So, and I guess that would be healthy for some tournaments at least to start doing that, because that will make people do new stuff.
Indeed. And for example, I know the Spanish Nationals in October is a single platoon theatre list.
Nice.
And again, that completely changed the way the meta. And that's really important. That's really, I'd hate to think every tournament ran double platoon, no restrictions, because you're just going to end up with double Stuart lists everywhere.
That is, I think it's pretty clear, right, from the meta we've done on Britcon, from the meta we've done on the WTC. That is what's happening when you're running multi-platoon 1,000 points. That is where we're ending. Right. So, should we explain to people about the ranking system? We've been talking about it a few times on multiple videos now. Russell, you started this, and the idea was, when did you come up with this idea of ranking players and lists?
I know a lot of people argue the player is more important than the list, and I'd agree with that. But then every good player tends to bring a good list, so it's hard to separate the two. But what I thought we could do is look at correlation coefficients. So the idea here is we're looking at how correlated is one factor to another factor in layman's terms. So like if it is perfectly predicted based on one factor definitely produces the other factor's outcome, you would have a correlation of 1. So it perfectly explains why this has happened. So I'm trying to think of an example. Say you took height and age. So you look at the average age of a human, and then you look at their height. The correlation is going to be pretty up to the age of, say, 21 will be very close to 1. So for children, because older you are, taller you tend to be. So that's and if the correlation is negative, so it predicts an opposite outcome, then it would be -1. So if there's no correlation at all, so the two things are not related at all, it would be 0. So that's what we're looking at. So what we did was we ranked, or we had a go at ranking how strong we thought lists were.
And let me just explain that, because what we did was we had a 5 point ranking system. So 5 lists, they were the strongest lists that we could possibly think of. We couldn't think of any improvements. These lists were just absolute beasts. Wacker, they will win almost any game. They are the top lists that we see at top tournaments used by top players. 4 very strong lists, maybe has 1 or 2 weaknesses, but still very, very strong lists. Optimized lists. 3 standard middle of the road stuff for tournaments. You see a lot of those. They may have a few weaknesses, but they're also well-rounded typically. 2s, suboptimal, maybe not optimized, could win a few games, but not well thought out, have glaring weaknesses. And 1, not tournament lists at all, fun lists that possibly has trouble winning any games, right? So that is the 5 rankings. So Russell, you had done this for the WTC and asked me to do it as well. So we ran through all the lists, and we did the same with Britcon as well. We ran through the lists, gave them our subjective view on what we thought on those 5 points, how the list worked, and we didn't actually agree on all of the lists.
Not on all of them, but we were able to get an average that was pretty close.
Yeah, it was pretty close. Yeah, and I think the most glaring difference between the two of us, at least, is that you typically rank mixed bag lists, balanced list a little bit better than I do, where I rank lists that have a very clear mono build a little bit better than the balanced lists. I don't know, maybe because I play more focused lists than I'm not sure, but anyway, we got an average, and that average was actually pretty interesting, because that really told us something for the WTC, and I think it does for this Britcon as well.
Well, maybe if we focus on WTC for the moment, and I'll explain why the next part. But with the WTC, when we rank lists, and our rankings were never more than half a point different, typically, or maybe 1 point different.
Yeah.
That is one problem, of course, with this. What we're doing, it is subjective. Yeah. So we make no bones in that. We can't be objective. Of course, it's subjective. But we looked at the rankings of the lists and then compared them to the results. Yeah. Of the lists, and the list correlation was about 0.65, which is pretty strong. So it means the ranking of your list gives us a good forecast on how well the list will do. Correlation,
and it also it pretty much confirmed that good players are able to look at a list and just read it and think, well, how good is this actually? So I mean, for me, that was a confirmation of well, I'm sort of okay at reviewing lists, which is a lot of what I do on this channel, right? I look at people's lists. Yeah,
that's the other way of thinking about it. Yeah, how well can you understand the working on the list? Yeah, so that was good. But then we went and this was more subjective, even more. I got 5 different captains. Actually, it was 6 in the end that were at WTC. Yeah. And I asked them to look at all the players they knew and rank the players. And I promised it would be kept anonymous.
Completely confidential.
Which it will be, so no one will ever know other than me who thinks what of who, because it would be fair otherwise. Yeah. And what came out of that was, first of all, there was some quite mixed views sometimes on how good a player was, which was quite interesting.
Yes.
But even with that taken into account, the correlation between how good a player is and how they did was about 0.84, which is so strong.
That is almost bang on.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I would say based on that, and I'm going to go off, and the reason I won't do the Britcon yet is because it's only my opinion, and I want to get a couple of other people's opinions.
Yes, of course.
So I think it's important. It's not just me. Obviously, there's a potential risk of bias. If you've seen a player who did really well, then you rank them well. So there could be a self-fulfilling prophecy element.
And that's why we going with the 6 captains, because the captains, we all knew our teams, right? So we knew the teams, and then we had played quite a lot of other players as well, and we could ask our team about those players as well. So I think it was more of an objective evaluation, although it did turn out like there was a lot of difference in some cases, but
it was,
but let me just again explain to the viewers. Again, we had that 5 points. We had number 5 was top 5 players in the world, like the best of the best. Then number 4 was top competitors, will win tournaments, really strong players, do make mistakes sometimes, but not a lot. Number 3, middle of the pack, pretty good competitive player, but will make mistakes, and you're sort of okay meeting him at a tournament. 2s, not really tournament players. 1s make a lot of mistakes. Definitely there just
beginners,
for the fun.
Maybe, or
beginners. Yeah.
So
that was the ranking. Yeah.
And it worked really well.
It did.
So it's the first. I think it's the first time anyone's actually tried to back up the idea that players are more important than lists, and that certainly suggests that there is truth in that. And I just know that anecdotally, we know of very good players who use average lists and perform incredibly well.
Yes.
Achilles, for example, comes to mind with the Spanish team.
Yes, and especially that it's surprising because going back to the WTC, he had brought. This is not about the WTC. This is still about Britcon, but he had brought a single platoon, balanced list. It was British. He did have some Gurkhas, but he also had a lot of other stuff going on. So it was really a balanced platoon, something that some of us were rating like not top listy, and did really well. And most of his of the players who ranked him, or the captains who ranked him really highly, right? Because he is a good player. He's one of the top players of Europe, at least, right?
And I'm going to link that actually to Megatron. I know you're in the middle of your review.
Yeah.
So when we were looking at who would do well, I listed Andy McKay.
Yeah.
As one of my favourites for the tournament, and he won it. And the thing I said straight away with a friend is, I bet he's got a very standard list that you would look at and go. And I don't know what his list is yet, so I could be completely wrong on this. But I'm guessing when you guys talk about the list,
this much that he had brought a German list and it had double Stuck.
Double Stuck, I like it, but again, it's not an optimum tank unit if you're bringing a tank. So, but I would imagine the list doesn't look that scary. But we will see. I look forward to finding out. That's my prediction. That he won with an okay list because he's just such a good player.
He is such a good player. I actually played him at the Scottish Nationals like the year before, and he beat me using 88s. It was amazing. It was a really good game. And his list didn't have the attack elements that I would expect because he beat me at the key positions. But he pounded me with his 88s, and then he had an outflanking flamer team in a Jeep or a Kubelwagen, came in, ran up to my objective, cleared it of all the Gurkhas and what have you, and just won the game. Absolutely amazing. Brought him the victory for the Scottish Nationals. But I mean, he is a really good player. But if you look at the other players as well, going into the top, most of them are on or competing to get on the Scottish WTC team as well.
They're all WTC players, Graham and Brian. Yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah. So they're all pretty good players. They know what they're doing. Yeah. So again, just telling stories here, just looking at the evidence in a slightly subjective manner, we do expect good players to win using average or whatever lists, but we also see them take very strong lists at most tournaments. Right. So should we try and maybe talk about how this ranking idea turned out for Britcon? We're not going to rank the players at all. We're not going to.
Yeah, the correlation on the list was strong, actually stronger than for WTC. But this is based on my ranking, so we have to go back and review it and see what others say. But it was about 0.76, which is very strong again based on lists.
Yeah.
So that's meaningful. I haven't done the players, and that's because at the moment it's only my rankings, and that would be unfair.
Yeah, that you would need more people to actually give rankings for
the good news is a lot of the English players know each other, so I'm hoping over the next couple of days to contact a couple, send them a list and say, what do you think of these players? And just find if people are willing to anonymously do it. So if you're interested, anyone out there watching it, if you'd like to rank your fellow English players anonymously, please do contact me.
Yes, do. Because that would really help us establish how much the correlation is between player lists and win ratio. It really helps just to understand what's going on here.
Absolutely.
My correlation was also pretty much okay, I guess. I had some outliers, but just looking at 4-5 lists, all of them were in the top 14, and all of my 2s were in the bottom half. So there is a correlation there. There are some outliers. There were some lists I pretty much had expected to do a lot better or worse. but they did okay. And again, that may be down to like one player sitting here subjectively evaluating lists. I think we need more eyes on all of the lists and all of the players to have a good result. But if I just look at the top players, like the top 5, all of them were bringing 3.5 lists in my view, or 4 or 5 lists. So they were all lists that were very strong or fairly good competitive lists with some.
I had them all at 4 of the top lists.
Yeah.
All of them 4 for me at the lowest. Yeah.
I didn't have any 3s in the top 5. I just I wish there was a point between 3 and 4, I guess. So
yes. Well, no, we should point out we do use half points as well to give us more accuracy.
Yeah. There weren't actually a lot of fiver lists for me. Were there for you?
Well, again, it's so subjective, isn't it?
It is.
So I would, obviously most people, they're going to a competitive tournament. In theory, you should consider your list to be a 5. Otherwise, why are you bringing it? So I obviously think my list is probably a 5. Yeah. And then I look at very similar lists like Paul Wicken's or Richard's, and they are very similar with 1 or 2 tweaks. And so, I think I ranked mine 4.5. But again, I was ranking Richard and Paul's Gurkha list 4.5. They just had slight variations on thing.
That's pretty funny because I was ranking your list. Your list. I think I was ranking at 4.5, but some of the other Gurkha lists I had only ranked as a 4. Maybe it's because I play Gurkha so much myself. I can see the weaknesses as well in some of those lists. I only had one list that was a 5 for me, and it did come in top 10, but not that well. So yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, again, that's the player factor as well, I guess.
It is, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, right. Here at the end, Russell, you said you had a personal story to relate to us about one game.
Oh, did I?
Yeah, you did. Oh, you were facing off against one of those new players that was it the final game or what happened?
Oh, the final game, yeah. So I won I won my first game.
Yeah.
Against the Japanese bamboo list.
That was Mike Goss's All Horde Bamboo. He didn't do terribly well. I had thought he would do better, but maybe he just
played it super aggressively. He hasn't played it for a couple of years.
Okay.
And I think what's happened is where it used to have Sturm and Drang, and people would see it and be terrified. Now people are seeing it and they're kind of okay, I know what to do now.
Yeah.
So very aggressive, throws them forward, and you just mow them down, just shoot them, mow them down, and stay firm. And so yes, that was fine. That meant I was number 1 ranked player for round 2 when the Swiss element kicks in. So I ended up having to play the number 2 ranked player every round.
Yeah.
Which is good. It's a nice way of playing it, actually.
Yeah, it is.
And it meant I played Chris Davies, who's the Welsh player, new guy. He had 3 wins and a draw.
Yeah.
So I had 4 wins. Final game.
Just to remind everyone, he was bringing a mounted recon list.
So
really strong list, Soviets.
Yeah, 17 dice. He's got Soviet recce engineers.
Actually, while we're talking about it, I'll just share my screen and show people the actual list, because we have it somewhere, don't we? Just a sec. I'll just share my screen, and we can even share your list if we want to. But let's see, where do we have it?
Should be right on the far left side on the tabs, because it's a D for Davies, so they're alphabetically ordered.
They're alphabetically ordered.
Yeah. At least they were when I said
it. Chris Davis. There we go.
Excellent.
Right. So he was bringing 2 lieutenants, 2 mounted recon with flamethrowers.
That's it.
2 scouts, 3 squad, heavy mortar and a medium mortar, 2 dog mines. What's that? Heavy AC.
Autocannon. Sorry, so he's got a heavy auto.
It's a heavy autocannon. Yes, of course.
Name of the unit, but yeah.
Yeah, and a gas jeep with MMG, a Stalker Steward, a Katusha, and 2 Bren gun carriers.
Exactly.
So that was his list. That was a good list.
Yeah, he's got a gun line that sits at the back.
Yeah.
Forces you to spread your units out, and then he can pick you off.
Yeah.
At key points. It's a very clever list. I think he got too cautious against me. We was on jungle board.
What were you playing?
Actually, the mission. Let me just check our rankings. It was meet engagement, I believe, or no man's land. Let me just check which one it was.
So a kill point one. Yeah.
It was a kill point mission, and it was mission number 5. It was no man's land.
Yeah.
And what happened? We had a jungle board, lots of terrain.
Yeah.
And it was a case of, I knew if he wanted to win the tournament, he had to get a win. Yeah. The draw was probably, draw would win it.
Not good enough for him, no.
So I just sat back and kind of invited him to come on.
Yeah.
And I basically, he at one point, he chased down a sniper.
Yeah.
That was a forward advance, but I managed to take out the unit that got the sniper.
Oh.
Forward observer fires right on turn 5. In hits, so I got myself into a 3-1 lead, about turn 4, and
then he's really pressured to push, and he's going to lose units.
He wasn't used to playing on that kind of board. The board was brand new for him, where there's no line of sight unless you work quite hard to get it, and he didn't flank any units into me, which I think was a big mistake.
Yeah,
he should have done that with the type of units he's got. If he got into my flanks.
Yeah, with those flamethrowers, I mean, that would be brilliant, getting into your flank.
Yeah, absolutely. But he kind of played pretty cautiously. And as a result, I was kind of comfortable all through the game. I'm sure with more practice, he'll play that table a lot better.
Yeah.
So that was the final game. Maybe slight anticlimax. So the funny thing on it though was I had a bet with another player that nobody would win 5 games at this tournament.
Ooh.
And on the final matchup, I was the only person who could win 5. And I must admit, it did cross my mind just to get the draw, just to prove myself. But so.
that would have been dumb. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it would have been fun. So that was interesting. And again, the other thing I'd say with the tournament, we had a lot of submarining. Do you know what I mean by that?
No, I have no idia.
What I mean,
it's where you get pushed down in like game 1 or 2, and then you resurface basically later.
Yeah. So we saw a lot of players. We saw a few surprise results, particularly in round 2, actually, but also round 1. People not getting wins that you'd expect to win, and it meant they were then getting draws by Swiss matchup. They were getting easier draws, arguably.
Yeah.
And then so I hope you won't mind me saying this, like Luke Salter, who came second at the tournament.
Yeah.
His first 2 results were draws.
Yeah.
So that in theory means he has a much lower ranking. So when he's drawn through his matchups,
he'll get an easier opponent. Yeah. In
theory, he should be getting easier games. Doesn't always work like that. But like his last game, he beat Topher in his last game. That's not an easy game.
He had very hard opponents as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So to be fair, and a lot of players, that seemed to happen to them. They dropped early results.
Yeah.
And people were getting lots of draws, more draws than I'm used to seeing. So about 20%.
Yes, I was surprised about that as well. There was a lot of draws.
Yeah, and that was interesting. I didn't expect that. But there you go. And that made the matchups more interesting in many ways.
Yeah.
So so a lot of the good players getting surprise results early, but lots of them did it. So actually finishing mid-table, as it were, on turn 2, turn 3, didn't help you. It meant you were getting a very tough draw against a very tough opponent who also had a bad day. So there were surprises. And I think it's wonderful that, you play 5 games and, it's only 2 out of 34 players had more than 3 wins. That is incredible. That is really good. Level of the tournament. Everybody could beat each other, and that's wonderful to see.
It is. That is really good. And it's also good that there weren't anybody who ended up with 0 wins or 0 only losses, because that turns into an unfun event.
It's a bad day, and unfortunately, everyone would have had at least one game they came away from where they were like, oh, I got a result, and that's really good.
Yeah, that is really good. Right, that was it, Russell. Is there anything you'd like to say here at the end? What are your plans for the next bit of your game life and your future here?
Oh, I'm going to do a few things that are not bold action related, because I've been doing a lot of it recently. But as I say that, I am busy painting a French list, which is nearly finished. I'm at the Welsh Open in 2 weeks, and I'm taking a Greek list.
Nice.
So
we've been experimenting with Greek lists as well. They're really good for outflanking.
They're fun. They're fun.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say they're very competitive, but they're definitely
fun. But they're fun, and they have some stuff they can do. So
that's right. And then in October, I'm off to Spain.
To
play the Spanish Nationals.
Yes.
October 15th.
Yep.
But before that, on first week of October, I think it's 1st and 2nd. As you know, Warlord cancelled their GT. We are running a replacement one in Southend. We've got, I think it's 16 players now signed up. Nice. So if anyone out there is interested in coming along to sunny Southend for 2 days of play, please do contact me. And I'll put you on the list.
And was there something about you, if people had a ticket for the GT, that you guys were letting them in easily or something?
Oh, we're charging £5 a day, which is what.
So that is pretty cheap. So, everyone can afford that.
We've got all the boards, and we're using the same pack to keep things simple.
Yeah.
I don't like the pack, but we use it, so it's easy.
No, because people have made the armies already, right?
Exactly. That's exactly how I saw it. We've got a couple of people we know who are coming from overseas. They can't cancel flights.
No.
They'll be like, well, you know what? We'll put something on, so at least they've got something to do.
Yeah.
And that's come along quite nicely. And Warlord have promised to support as well. So
that is good. That is good. Picking up the slack. Right, Russell. If not before, I will see you at the next WTC. I guess we'll do more videos before that. But
I'll see you before then anyway. So I'm promising to get to Denmark, and I will someday.
Oh yeah, there will be a Danish national coming up in the spring. So right. That was it for the Britcon, and congratulations again, and thank you for joining us. Right.
Pleasure. See you soon, bye. Bye.
Yes.